When AI agents or software starts making payments on behalf of us, what do you think becomes the real control layer in the system?
The new product is intent and trust. I don't want to have to choose at the moment of truth. I want to have one payment credential that is intelligent. We're not there yet everywhere as we need to be. In the contactless evolution, I would say, is agentic commerce. It's already changing the way we pay. It's already changing the way we live.
Today, I'm joined by Bunita, Chief Consumer Product Officer at Mastercard. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Wrap Up Podcast. Guys, when I started this podcast episode, I remembered that how it's easy just to tap your phone and make the purchase or payment, but underneath, a lot is changing these days. Consumers are expecting a lot more control and speed, and banks are under pressure. And Bunita, how AI is changing everything now. So to unpack all of this, today I'm joined by Bunita, Chief Consumer Product Officer at Mastercard. Bunita, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you, Sam. And like you said, there's so much happening right now. It's an exciting time to have this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Bunita, you oversee consumer and issuer products at Mastercard globally, basically. So how would you define the role of a network today when fintechs and banks and big tech are all competing for the a consumer interface? They are trying to change it. How would you define the role?
Yeah, it's an exciting time, like you said, and there are so many diverse players who want in on this space and have important roles to play, to be frank. So I'm very proud to be here as part of this global network because we help interconnect everybody into the ecosystem, right? We have the opportunity to partner and also sometimes compete with folks across the ecosystem. But the role of the network is to bring those connections, is to help ensure that consumers feel confident in payments and that they can trust on safety and reliability at scale, right? And so the work of the network is really to make sure, whether they're banks or fintechs or merchants or AI platforms even, right, that we're providing a connected capability that's safe, that's seamless, and that's ubiquitous for consumers as they manage their payments all around the world.
Right. Look, from your point of view, what's fundamentally changing in how consumers interact with money today compared, let's say, to 5 years ago, or maybe even 10 years ago? Because every day I see some sort of news that's coming up, changing, some sort of new payment rail, new payment methods, and everything changing so far.
Yeah. Well, I think there is some things that are really fundamental shifts, in fact, structural shifts that are happening now versus if we were to look back at the payments ecosystem even 5 years ago, right? First and foremost, I would start by saying there's more orchestration to be had, and consumers are actually even more planful in how they're thinking about what payments they want to make, which funding source they want to utilize, in which channel they want to make that transaction, for example. But there's also a whole host of new capabilities coming in, right? Whether those are agentic capabilities that you kicked off the call with, or whether those are access to new and changing rails, right? The acceleration of account to account rails, the acceleration of card rails, the introduction of stable coins, right? There's so much change that is upon us. And yet what's very, very clear, consumers are resilient, they're savvy, they're digital, they're ready, but they do need to have choice, right? We want to help enable the choice of any of those rails that we just described. We want to help enable the interface in which they want to cooperate, for example. And I'm, for one, particularly excited because I think as we do talk about agentic, we can't help but not talk about AI and agentic solutioning. That's going to be very empowering for the consumer, but there's work for us to do as an ecosystem. We have to ensure that consumers can participate with all of these choices, but in a way that's very trusted and that keeps their information and their data safe. And so when I think about a solution like Mastercard Agent Pay, it's designed exactly for that. And very recently, you may have observed, we announced something that we call verifiable intent. And this to me is so critical because we think about autonomous payments, right? Agent-driven payments. While consumers are going to articulate their needs and their preferences, there has to be recourse for the consumer, but also for the merchants who are participating so everybody can ultimately verify that Sam selected his choice, made this preference, and even authorized that transaction so that an agent can operate on his behalf, for example.
Right. You already touched some of the points that I want to ask in my next question. One is I already know that Mastercard sits at the center of global data transaction. You have access to so much information about the transactions and how consumers are behaving. what are the most important shifts you are seeing from those data points that in consumer behavior changing currently, but still we underestimate that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great question, right? Because we can get consumed with so many things that are changing and all
Yeah.
the trends and what are the most meaningful ones for us to focus on. It's a great question, Sam. So I would be remiss if I didn't start with AI because you
Okay.
started with the data, right? Fundamentally, AI in and of itself is not new, right? Artificial intelligence and the use of large language models, that in particular is not necessarily the new part. The new part
Right.
is that consumers are involved now in thinking about how they want to assign tasks, work with agents to actually think
Okay.
about, their buying and selling needs, right? And so that's
Right.
kind of the fundamental shift, and it's not to be underestimated because that shift is occurring now and it's occurring fast and it's requiring all of us, all of the ecosystem participants, but certainly us as a network to protect them and to make sure these are
Right.
safe and standardized along the way, right?
Right.
I think the second shift that I would hit on if I go away from AI for just a moment, as we
Sure.
really think about consumers, is that they are also, both functionally and emotionally tied to their everyday payments, right? This is how people operate their everyday lives. And so there's a significant shift in terms of thinking about, if I think about sort of affluent consumers, like going from status to going to intention. And that's true across all of consumers. Like, I want to make sure that why I want to make this payment is recognized, and the
Yeah.
emotional connection that I might feel connecting to my passions and the benefits that I expect to receive, that those are
Sure.
embedded in my value proposition as well. And I think there's a really high shift there as well. And I think the last thing I would just say, I'd round it out with that consumers, this is money, right? This is people's
Of
money.
course.
They want to
Of
feel
course.
empowered and they need to feel control, right? And they need to make sure that they understand where their credentials are, how their money is being moved, and that they have the rights that they need. They retain those rights to be able to turn, preferences on and off, to be able to put their credentials where they need them, and also give the rules that they want associated with that credential. And so there's a
Okay.
much larger demand on transparency and tools that help feel that they are in control of their payments going forward.
Right. And Bonita, all of these changes that you mentioned right now, they are all trying to make the consumer payments more seamless, and all the providers are trying to do that. Since I started working in payments industry the last 8 years, all the time I hear that we want to make the payments seamless. But I also think that new technologies
Yeah.
are creating friction. It's not frictionless still. So where do you think this friction sits at the moment?
Yeah, it's such a great point. And sometimes some friction are good to help us make sure we have a check and a balance. Are you sure you want to move
True.
forward? Right. So some friction can be good, but there's also some friction that we think still has opportunity to improve, right? And I'll use maybe QR as an example, right? I think QR
Please.
payments are proliferating around the world, particularly across Asia, particularly across Latin America, and they add value, right? And I do think that there's been a benefit to QR in opening up access and opening up payments where otherwise cash was particularly prevalent, as an example. But there's also a downside or a complication associated with QR because QR hasn't yet achieved what I think is already an available technology in
Yeah.
contactless technology, right? Tap and go, which to me is the best in class standard. Every consumer would want the ability to be able to simply tap their device, whether that's a physical card or whether that's their mobile device, for example, and
Absolutely.
be able to seamlessly move through. And the way that we leverage both technology and consumer user experiences allows consumers to maintain that control, retain confidence, but also not have the friction associated with when the system is offline. QR is an offline mode. And so if
Yeah.
I'm, wanting to pay for my valet parking, but I'm in the basement of a garage in Sao Paulo and the Wi-Fi doesn't work, that's a friction that I don't need, right? Because I want to make sure
Yeah.
that my normal payment goes through. Or similarly, if I'm in the lunch line and I need to move quickly, right? And I'm in a rush to get back to the office and have and get back to my next meeting, sometimes the pace and speed of a QR transaction actually can slow things down. And that does create a friction where it's not really warranted, for example.
I just want to add a couple of points regarding the QR payments because I am originally from Uzbekistan, and unfortunately we still don't have a tap to pay. We don't have Apple Pay, we don't have a Google Pay, neither PayPal or others. Hopefully they will come to the market. But we are active users of QR payments, and as you said, sometimes I really feel the friction getting my phone out, and like when I have to move fast, it creates definitely friction. But hopefully, the regulation is changing in my country, and soon we will have Apple Pay, Google Pay, or some other types of wallets where we just could use our mobile phone to make the
Exactly.
payment.
Exactly.
And I think that would be one of the great examples of like a great consumer experience, especially in 2026. But what are some of the things that the players in the market are getting wrong about creating this great consumer experience, great payment experience in 2026, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, I think one of the key things is that we actually have to collaborate, not necessarily always compete. Standards can help us, and they can help us move more quickly, and making sure that we help all markets rise to that highest common denominator. A tap and go experience, for example, to me is that highest
Yeah,
common denominator, helping open up ways to partner and play, I think will help consumers be the winner at the end, right? I think we've seen a lot of examples, just like the one you just gave, but in a number of markets all around the world where the behavior is siloed, right? Or where
yeah,
the participation model is siloed, and the consumer really doesn't benefit from that. We don't want to have to think as consumers about multiple mechanisms or multiple methodologies. We want things to
true.
work similarly and consistently. And so, to me, the key to that, and again, I think very much is the role of a network, is collaboration, is partnership. It's
Hmm.
sharing the best ways forward. It's sharing some of our collective insights, and it's even standardizing certain key, sort of table stakes technologies, because we don't want too many barriers for entry. We want consumers to enter with confidence.
Right, true. And Bunita, I asked my audience, so I have a number of audience, and I asked them what questions I should ask you. And one of those questions were that since you worked at HSBC, now you work at Mastercard, now you've seen multiple waves of like next big things coming in. Like
Yep.
one example is stable coins, AI, agent payments, and etc. So what do you think? What are the three underestimated trends today that could fundamentally reshape how consumers behave actually?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to try to rattle the three off right off the bat. First,
Sure.
contactless. We were already there. I actually think contactless is in some markets underestimated and needs to move more quickly because it is the best in class experience for consumers. So I would absolutely start with contactless. The second I would say is agentic commerce. I definitely think that agentic commerce is, if anybody's on the fence about whether or not it's a meaningful trend that will be here to stay, it's going to change the way we pay. It's already changing the way we pay. It's already changing the way we live, right?
Yeah,
So being
absolutely.
involved and being with the consumer and helping them on that journey, but also ensuring that we do so with trust and standards like verifiable intent, and making sure that people can participate with confidence.
Definitely.
Definitely a key trend not to be underestimated. And then the third, we didn't really spend enough time talking about, but I would say it's this notion of this blurry line now, where I think consumers are super smart and super savvy, and they know
Okay.
at the time of a transaction which funding source they want to pull from. I know when I need to use debit
Hmm.
or my current account and I have the funds available. I know when I need to use a loan or a line of credit because it might be a larger ticket or a occasional transaction. But I don't want to have to choose at the moment of truth and fiddle through. I want to use one credential. I want to have one payment credential that is intelligent, I can set my
Okay.
preferences with, that will allow me to make my choices ahead of time because they're known to me. And so when my small ticket transactions are happening, I know I want my coffee to come out of my current account every time. But when I might be making an occasional transaction, it's time to buy a new television, I might want that to install and have a clear repayment schedule. So to me, that third one is really about having flexibility in payments, but a single credential that helps me manage my financial life.
Honestly, I was more or less aware of the first two, one contactless and the agentic commerce, but the last one, I never thought about it. Now you gave me a thought, like to think how this could evolve. It's a great topic. Maybe I will have another guest to discuss this one, like particularly.
Yeah.
My next question is like, in all of this flow, we have issuers
Yep.
now who are facing pressure from fintechs on one side and infrastructure players on the other side. So moving forward, where do you see their role evolving in the next few years?
In terms of the intersection of traditional players and fintech players?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to understand the role of issuers, how that would be, evolving in the next few years.
Yeah, look, I think that our issuers are a critical component to consumers' financial lives. One,
Yeah.
in terms of supplying their payment capability and their banking capabilities, but two, ensuring that they're listening and understanding how their needs are evolving and making sure that they're staying where the consumer is, in which channels they want to participate, with which form factors do they need, right? To me, the key for our issuing community going forward is going to be making sure that we keep a few key insights in mind. This notion
Okay.
of control and making sure that we keep consumers empowered and that they need flexibility in their choices and they need flexibility in their tools, but that they really would prefer to have everything from their main financial
Yeah.
institution, for example, right? That's kind of a key
Right.
insight that we know, right? Actually, if you look at Gen Z consumers, 2/3 of them say that they would prefer to have everything from their main financial institution. Now, that doesn't mean they're not willing to shop with others and try things out if they can't find that newer capability or the capability that suits their needs. But actually,
Right.
if we're listening to the consumers and we're understanding some of these key trends, we have every right to get maximum share of wallet or maximum set of main financial institution status, which is in play, right? So the first is understanding the consumer's desire for control. I think you already said it, rightly so. Consumers expect things to be seamless. And yet,
Yeah.
the right kind of friction needs to be there to keep them protected along the way. So, having a clear digital first roadmap and making sure that we're staying with the consumer in a way that the solutions are helping solve those friction points where they need them is important. And then the last is maybe the most fun, and that is around personalization and being able to really know the consumer, but really offer them ways that unlock that emotional set of excitement that can come with even their financial products, right? I'll give you an example.
Yeah, please.
In December last year, we launched what we call Mastercard Access Pass. It's a
Okay.
brand new capability that we did, and we piloted it together with First Abu Dhabi Bank in the UAE. And it allowed us bringing a digital first experience to all of First Abu Dhabi Bank's credit and debit card holders, the opportunity to get incremental benefits with a key partner of ours, McLaren, right? And a way
Okay.
to connect consumers with their passions in a hyper personalized way where they get access, unprecedented access to
Okay.
the team, to the drivers, to the benefits, and all of this on top of what they're already getting from their debit and credit products,
Right.
but in a way that's really reaching that fan base, the consumer who loves McLaren, for example. And so I think
True.
that third angle is that as we connect consumers with their passions,
Mm-hmm.
issuers or financial institutions have a real opportunity to stand out with their cardholders.
Vanita, you mentioned number of things that you are doing with the issuers, and what do you think is the biggest support that Mastercard providing to issuers currently, and that you guys are planning to continue in providing?
Yeah, maybe I'll hit on two angles in terms of our partnership with issuers. First, of course, we have a trusted network. We are a brand of trust. We have
Okay.
global acceptance worldwide, and we can help our banks get very closely connected to their customers everywhere they need to go, everywhere they want to be, with consistency, with ubiquity, with a seamless way of operating all around the
Okay.
world. And then the second is this notion of connecting consumers with their passions, right? For example, we invested in what we call the Mastercard collection. And the beauty of
Okay.
the Mastercard collection is complementing what an issuer may bring in their value proposition to you as a cardholder. We help unlock access to travel, dining, and entertainment benefits all around the world. So if your card was originated in Europe, you still get
Okay.
access to all of the benefits worldwide. If your card was originated in the United States and you're traveling to Europe as a MasterCard
Mm.
cardholder, as a member of the MasterCard collection, you get access to these benefits that help super size the benefits that an issuer can offer all by themselves.
Right, right. No, I mean, I like this experience of opening up the global doors because, again, when I first moved to Europe, again, I was mostly relying on my Mastercard to make the payments because in Uzbekistan we have local cards as well. We have local card brands, but unfortunately they don't work globally.
Yeah.
It's like a Mastercard or like another international brands that I have to use. Bonita, look, I would love to go back to the topic of AI because it's
Yeah.
hot now and everyone is basically developing something in AI vertical. And as you just mentioned, AI is moving basically from just assisting, now they're already making a decision on behalf of customers,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How does that change the way Mastercard thinks about trust and authorization in the age of AI, basically?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a pronounced topic, right? I don't think it necessarily changes insofar as that's always been the role of the network, to ensure that we're offering the necessary capabilities both in standards and in our
Okay.
franchise rules, for example, to make sure that all of the partners, all of the players know what to expect and have a recourse if something were to go unexpectedly, something goes
Yeah.
wrong. And I think that's just a more pronounced need in the world of agentic commerce, right? Where again, you may have an agent operating on a consumer's behalf. And so the agent, we need to have a verifiable intent to be able to say, did the consumer give that permission? What was the intention in providing that position? And did the agent appropriately act on their behalf? And it creates a bit of a record, right, so to speak,
Right.
that the merchant community can rely on, for example. And so it creates
Right.
a layer of trust, an orchestrated layer of trust for all of the participants backed by Mastercard, right? And it's something that we think is a very critical need as we expect consumers to lean into agentic commerce. We expect this to move very rapidly, but we want to make
Okay.
sure that we're doing it eyes wide open, that while of course we're focusing on wonderful innovation and fun and new experiences, that we don't have any reduction in the trust associated with these types of transactions going forward.
I see. And Bunita, I have a couple more questions from my audience regarding the AI that I have to ask, and I
Sure.
would read this one. Like in a world where AI agents can initiate transactions again across different platforms, because through the APIs they can do a lot of things now. How do you think about preventing fragmentation while still maintaining trust and interoperability for consumers? It could be a bit complex question, but I'm sure you will be able to answer this.
It's such a great question, right? Because again, innovation comes from everywhere. And so
Right.
when things start in any individual place or with any individual player, that on one hand does lead to fragmentation. And yet, as we see where the trends are, what's truly scalable, I think that's where we think things like verifiable intent, where we bring a standard into the world. We've offered that standard to the world that will help
Right.
us move from a fragmented approach to a common approach that will allow us
Okay.
to operate innovation at scale. So I think there's always going to be a little bit of a tension. There'll always be some fragmentation, but I think the best capabilities like contactless, the best capabilities like what we think will happen with agent pay and verifiable intent, these will become common practices and standardized. Now, I think technology will allow us then to think about where we need to help on the consumer's behalf make sure things are
Okay.
interoperable, right? Because every system may not connect to each other, but we can make sure that they talk to each other when we have standards. We can make sure that the
Right.
technology enables that more seamless and ubiquitous experience. And so I think there's always going to be, like I said, they're going to coexist a little bit of fragmentation. Not everything will be made interoperable by design, but we can be
True.
very intentional about how we connect those dots on behalf of the consumer and the ecosystem. And that, again, I
Okay.
think is an incredible strength of MasterCard that we're very, very proud to deliver.
I believe so. And again, I definitely love this how interconnected you guys are and the access to the amount of data you have. And the next question again from my audience is that again, when AI agents or software starts making payments on behalf of us, basically, what do you think becomes the real control layer in the system? Who would control everything?
Yeah, look, I think that the new product is intent and trust, right? And making sure
Okay.
that we can understand, document, and share the
All
intention
right.
all along the way. That way, all of the participants in an ecosystem, no matter what part of the journey they're getting involved in, that there's a trusted layer and there's a trusted documentation of intention, because I think that's going to be critical, one, to interoperability, but also to
Okay.
ensure that everybody can participate for the pursuit of a better outcome for the consumer. But I think that
Yeah.
having those standardized ways of orchestrating and communicating and documenting that intent are going to be very important going forward.
Oh, very great points. I like it actually. And a couple of last questions actually. Since you are part of one of the biggest networks in the world, if you look ahead 3 to 5 years, what are the 2 or 3 shifts that will most and fundamentally reshape how consumers make payments?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so we have to find a crystal ball. That's look. I think we hit on some of them because consumers are telling us now what's to come, and I do think that some things are actually, in some sense, not different, they're just amplified in a different way, right? Consumers are going to look to networks and financial
Okay.
institutions and our ecosystem to keep their information, to keep their identity, to keep their data, to keep their money safe. And that will always be in focus for us as Mastercard, because we
Okay.
know that fragmentation, added complexity also creates space for the bad guys to come in. And so we have to be extremely vigilant and be ahead of that curve, because nothing will hold us back other than a deterioration of trust. So we have to continue to focus on ensuring that we're delivering on trust and security along the way. I think the other thing I would say that is sort of an undeniable trend is, again, more and more personalization, which means
Okay.
we have to have more flexibility in the way things operate, right? So
All
where
right.
yesterday, to have a debit card, you'd have a payment credential that singularly attached to a current account, for example. This notion where I said you could have a singular credential attached to multiple funding sources, be that your current account, be that your loan, be that your stable coin, be that your loyalty
Yeah.
currency, right? That to me is a trend that's here for the future. Consumers will expect seamlessness and ubiquity and having simplicity at the front end. So it's our jobs in the technology layers to make sure that the technology works hard for the consumer and is able to enable that type of flexibility and personalized experience that they expect going forward.
And in your opinion, this is my last question. In your opinion, do you believe the market sees all of these trends, or I would say, what do they get wrong about the latest trends?
It's a good question. Look, I do think the market is seeing these trends, but they may be dialing up or dialing down in any given place based on the local
Right.
context or based on the bets that people are making in terms of where they think, what will last in the long run. I think from my perspective, the key themes that we've been discussing, where we need to dial
Okay.
up and remain vigilant and focused. We need to dial up and remain vigilant and focused in the agentic space. That's undeniable. We need to remain dialed up. And in fact, as you just said, we're not there yet everywhere as we need to be in the contactless evolution, because that's
Yeah.
for sure the superior option for consumers and cardholders, but we're not there yet,
True.
right? We don't have contactless in every transit system, for example. We don't have contactless in every
Unfortunately.
market, physical or digital, right? And so I think these are some examples where the trend has been there, but where the work is not done, and we have to continue down that path.
Sounds good, yeah. Bunita, thank you so much for joining. I really enjoyed this conversation. And for everyone listening, if you enjoyed this episode, share it with your team, share it with your friends, and I will see you in the next one.
Thank you, Sam. What a pleasure. So good to have this conversation together. Thank you so much.